Barberton, Ohio, a small town with quiet streets, friendly faces, and secrets that no one wanted to say out loud. Behind the porches and quiet yards, something darker was growing. Something that would explode on Mother's Day weekend of the year 2000 and change one family forever. This is the story of Mickey Wilson and Eddie Rhodes, a story buried under rumors, fear, silence, and unanswered questions. A story a daughter has been fighting to get reopened for 25 years. And it all begins with a terrified 17-year-old girl running for her life down Bell Street, begging someone to call 911. When Dee walked up to her mother's house that night, she felt it immediately. Something was wrong. The back door was wide open. Mickey's dog was standing in the doorway, confused and quiet. His food bowl was empty. He hadn't even been fed. Only the kitchen light was on. Everything else inside the house was dark. Dee and her cousin Melinda stepped inside. The sheets that normally hung between the living room and the bedroom were tied back. The house felt still, too still. Dee walked toward the bedroom and turned on the light on the dresser. And that is when her world shattered. Her mother was lying still on the bed, and the first thing she saw were the pillows. A pillow over her mother's head, a pillow over Eddie's head. Dee didn't see any red fluid at that moment. She just knew something was terribly wrong. She shook her mom gently and said, "Mom, wake up, please wake up." But her mother was cold. Dee looked at Melinda standing in the makeshift doorway and said, "My mom is deceased." The moment she said it out loud, she broke. She panicked, cried, and ran out the door, sprinting down Bell Street to her Aunt Jackie's house while Melinda stayed behind, frozen in shock. Dee and Jackie rushed back to the house. The three of them, Dee, Melinda, and Jackie, walked into the bedroom together. Melinda lifted the pillow from Eddie's head. That was when they saw the wound, and the scene only became more confusing from there. Eddie's body was positioned in a way the human body cannot make on its own. His left arm was bent backwards toward his head in a way that is physically impossible. Both legs were broken. Both kneecaps were damaged. 16 bones in total were broken. The way he was found on the bed did not match the injuries he had. Nothing about how Eddie was positioned made sense. Not then, not now. While Aunt Jackie was standing outside waiting for help, Dee kept running back and forth in panic. She was overwhelmed, shaking, and terrified. And before the police arrived, she admitted to doing something out of fear and love. Dee went back into the house and gathered all the substance she could find. She said she did it because she didn't want her mom to get in trouble. Part of her, in that moment of shock, was still thinking her mom might somehow be alive. She acted out of fear, confusion, and instinct. But the nightmare didn't start that night. It started the day before. Dee visited her mom twice on Saturday, once earlier in the day, and again later that evening. During her daytime visit, she came to get $20 for the Cherry Blossom Festival. When she walked into the bedroom, she saw something she would never forget. The entire queen-sized bed was filled, edge to edge, with bricks of green wrapped in cellophane. And beside them was a stack of cash. She asked Eddie if she could have a little extra money. He told her no because the money wasn't his to give. Then he told her she needed to leave, but he didn't tell her why. He was nervous. He kept looking out the windows. He was paranoid. And according to what people whispered, Eddie had been told that somebody, or more than one somebody, was coming after him. He didn't want anyone around if something happened. Mickey was supposed to keep her grandson over the weekend, but Eddie told her that wasn't a good idea. With everything going on and the fear of whatever was headed their way, he didn't want Mickey's grandson anywhere near the house. He didn't want something happening to him. He didn't want something happening to Dee either. Dee and Eddie went into the kitchen to smoke because Mickey didn't want to see it. Before she left, Mickey told Dee not to stand by the windows. She didn't say why. Later that evening, Dee came back to the house again. Her mom was getting ready to go out, black jeans, white shirt, hair done. Eddie was in the same gray sweats, gray sweatshirt, and brown work boots he had been wearing earlier. Dee asked Eddie if he was going too. He snapped at her and said, "I don't need to go anywhere with your mom. She's nothing but a hoe." Dee flipped out, furious at the way he talked to her mother, then left the house angry. During that visit, Dee also saw Eddie's cousin and her son sitting on the couch. That same night, around 7 to 9 in the evening, a woman named Catherine and her husband Phil stopped over at Mickey and Eddie's. Catherine brought a 6-pack of Bud Light and a 12-pack of Busch. She said Eddie was acting unusual, pacing the floor while everyone else sat and talked. He kept looking out the window behind the TV. He kept hearing noises and jumping up. At one point, he asked Phil if he had a piece or knew anyone selling one. Catherine noticed powder on a mirror Eddie was carrying around. There was loose green on the edge of the kitchen table, enough to roll about 6 dozen. All 4 of them smoked off a large roach. They talked about going out, but could never decide where. Catherine eventually asked to leave because Eddie's behavior made her uncomfortable. He kept saying strange things like he didn't know what life was about. He told her he had been awake for 2 days. She said it was the first time she ever saw him do powder. Catherine also said that earlier that week, on Friday morning around 6:30, Mickey and Eddie stopped by her place and asked if she needed a ride to work. She thought it was strange because she hadn't seen them since Thanksgiving. On the drive, Eddie even asked if she knew anyone who wanted any powder. Earlier in the afternoon that same Saturday, Michael and Richard had been at Mickey's house as well. They had been cutting trees at Michael's place and needed Eddie's truck, so they parked up at Mickey's. Michael dropped off his daughter at Jackie's house a couple doors down and then returned. Normally, Michael just walked right in, but this time the door was shut tight and hard to open. He had to push it with force. Richard stayed in the kitchen while Michael peeked into the bedroom. Mickey was curled up facing Eddie. Eddie was on his stomach with his boots hanging off the bed. Everything looked still, like they were asleep. Michael later said there were no pillows on their heads at that time. They left the house believing the 2 of them were sleeping, but many people never believed that part of Michael's story. For years, the rumor has been that Michael saw exactly what had happened to Mickey and Eddie, and he panicked. People believed he didn't want to be blamed. They believed he didn't want to see what he had seen. And they believed he put the pillows over their heads himself, not to harm them, but because he didn't want to face it and didn't want to be part of whatever just went down inside that house. And that is why, when Dee found them later that night, both Mickey and Eddie had pillows placed over their heads. Then there was Frankie, the last person believed to have seen them alive. On Thursday, Eddie had made Frankie strip naked because he thought he was wearing a wire. Eddie threatened him with a glass mug and Frankie stripped. The next night, a little before midnight on Friday, Frankie went back to Eddie. Eddie was wearing only a towel, getting ready to take a bath. Mickey was walking out the door to get cigarettes. There was an 8-ball of powder on a plate. Frankie and Eddie did a couple lines and talked for a few minutes. Eddie told Frankie he'd meet him down at the white front bar. Frankie left before Mickey came back. Frankie went to the bar, but Eddie and Mickey never showed. On Sunday around 4 in the afternoon, Frankie and his girlfriend went to Eddie's again. No one answered. Frankie later told people he went back Saturday night because he wanted to buy powder to sell at the bar. Eddie spotted him some, and Frankie expected Eddie to show up later to collect the money, but Eddie never showed. Frankie said that when he went to the door that night, he told Eddie, "I can't be a part of this." Then either he stepped aside or left completely, and whoever was hiding off to the side where Eddie couldn't see them stepped forward and entered the house. No one knows who that person was. But if Frankie's story is true, then Frankie knows exactly who went inside that house. And to this day, no one knows whether Frankie walked away, whether he stayed nearby as a lookout, or whether he stood right there and watched everything unfold. After that, people in the neighborhood claimed that men in hazmat suits entered the house. That rumor spread because no fingerprints were found, no shoe prints, nothing under either victim's nails, but they did find one single hair on Eddie. A man named Randall said he saw a van leaving the house, but he couldn't remember when or what it looked like. A man named Vinny was believed to have some involvement and was interviewed. He implicated Sean and Jerry, but when Sean's home was searched, nothing was found. Neighbors had their own stories. One neighbor said she went to bed at 10 at night and didn't hear a thing, not even her dog's bark, and she said she always heard them. The mailman said people talked about Eddie owing $60,000 for Crystal. Someone else said they saw a car with a loud muffler around 3 in the morning. Another neighbor said they heard tires peeling out around 6 in the evening. Inside the house, the police found something chilling. On the back of one there was a pile of someone had written in green crayon, "Mickey is dead, ha ha ha." Mickey loved her photos. She never left them scattered like that. Dee also noticed something strange about the ceiling. It had been freshly remodeled the day before, but the next evening it was torn apart. She never knew why. Upstairs, her bedroom dresser drawers were pulled out and her clothes were thrown everywhere. There were threats surrounding Eddie, too. He had been calling and writing to Gary's girlfriend while Gary was in prison. and after Eddie got out, he went to the stadium bar and ran into her. That night, Eddie flirted with her. Gary was the type of person people said you didn't cross. And Eddie had crossed him more than once. A man named Dave, who knew Eddie from work and prison, told the police something chilling. He said he once talked to a guy named Mike about people they both knew. When Eddie's name came up, Mike looked at him with a dead serious stare and said, "Eddie has a bullet waiting for him." More people came forward. Sean said that Jeremy and David asked him to help move 2 heavy bales from the woods into Vinny's house. When they cut one open, it was green. Vinny took some. David put the rest in his trunk. Sean said those bales were huge and extremely heavy. Jeremy later confirmed the people involved. Himself, Sean, Vinny, David, and David Jr. They said it had all been stolen from a nearby house. Then there was Paul, who met Gary in prison. Gary talked openly about being indicted for multiple unalivings. He bragged about people he had hurt. When Paul was released, Gary arranged for him to stay with his girlfriend for a short time. According to what was whispered, Eddie was supposed to do something for Gary while Gary was locked up. Gary paid him, but Eddie spent the money instead on a leather jacket for himself and possibly for Michael. Eddie never did what he was paid for, and then he flirted with Gary's girlfriend. Gary allegedly was furious. Sam, Mickey's son, was released from jail the next morning at 9. He believed Eddie was the target. He heard Eddie had 10 pounds of green taken from Brian. He heard that some kids from Norton had broken into a house and stolen between 50 and 70 pounds of green. He told the detective that the names being whispered were Brian, Jimmy, John, Jeff, and possibly Joe. Sam said Eddie usually had 1 pound at his house, not 10. He believed Jimmy and John had something to do with what happened to Eddie. Another rumor involved DJ, who said he heard from Jason that Brandon ended up with 15 pounds of stolen green. Eddie stole it from him, and Brandon knew what happened. A warrant was issued for Brandon, but he was never found. There was also someone from Eddie's family who tried to get answers. He asked questions, talked to people, tried to understand why Eddie was taken. Then he was beaten up, and a couple days later he was found unalived in a tree. The way he was found didn't match the idea that he did it to himself. The way the tree was shaped made no sense. People whispered, people questioned. But officially, nothing came of it. And then there was a reporter named Ryan. He had just moved to Barberton with his wife and their 2 small children. He was new to town and had just started working for the Barberton Herald. After hearing about Mickey and Eddie's case, he told Dee he wanted to help. He wrote 1 article and promised there would be 6 or 7 more. He wanted to dig deeper. Ryan went to the police station expecting a full file. Something organized, something ready. Instead, the officers looked at him like they didn't even know what he meant. Nothing was pulled, nothing was prepared. It was like the case didn't matter. Ryan was upset. He said a case like this should be on someone's desk every day. He couldn't understand why nothing was being done. And then suddenly he was gone. He disappeared from Barberton. No goodbye, no explanation, no more articles. No follow-up with Dee. One day he was promising the truth, and the next, no one ever heard from him again. After everything else, there was the history of the house itself. Long before Mickey and Sampson ever lived there, another man had taken his own life inside that house. When Sampson moved in, he had to rip out drywall and flooring that was still stained with red fluid from that earlier tragedy. People whispered that the land was cursed, that the property carried a darkness long before Mickey ever lived there. 13.5 years before Mickey was unalived, her husband Sampson was unalived inside that same house by his best friend Ronald. And later, while Ronald was serving time in prison for what he did, someone else unalived him there. To Mickey's family, it never felt like coincidence. Too many lives had been lost in connection to that house. And then came the night Mickey and Eddie were found. When the police finally finished inside the house, they did something that still shocks the family to this day. They told the kids they could go back inside. Dee's brother carried Mickey and Eddie's bed out into the yard and burned it. And while the family was still in shock, still trying to process what they had walked into, strangers began showing up. People no one recognized were walking in and out of the house, taking Mickey's belongings, her pots, her pans, her dishes, anything they could grab. They didn't ask. They didn't care. They just took whatever they wanted. Mickey's mother stood there helpless, watching strangers walk out of the house with pieces of her daughter's life. It haunted her for the rest of her days. Then came something almost no one talks about. A man with the last name Russ showed up after the tragedy. No one knew his first name or his actual job. He never said if he worked for the city or if he was an inspector. All he told Dee and Linda was that they had to pay $10,000 to keep the property. Linda didn't trust it. It didn't feel right. Later, they learned the city had been sending all the official paperwork to the former owners, people who no longer had anything to do with the house. Because the letters went to the wrong place, Mickey's family had no idea the house was scheduled to be torn down. The only reason they found out was because Linda was driving home from work one day and saw it happening. She turned the corner and watched as machines tore the house down, the place where Mickey raised her children, without any warning. The family kept the land and eventually sold it, but that wasn't the point. They wanted their mother's house. They wanted to protect the last place she lived. And then came the silence, the threats, the years of unanswered questions. When Dee was 17, a man named Jesse drove by taunting her, warning her not to speak about her mother's case. Each time she tried to talk about what happened, she got silent phone calls, nothing but breathing on the other end. For a girl who had already lived through a nightmare, the fear never really left. 15 years later, Dee gathered the courage to walk into the Barberton Police Department and ask for the records from her mother's case. She told them who she was. She told them she needed answers. They told her they would reopen the case. They told her they would help, but nothing happened. They never called her back. They refused to give her the paperwork. She walked out of the building the same way she walked in, alone. Through all of this, the one thing that never changed was who Mickey was. Mickey was the type of person who worked 3 jobs. She played pool and darts. She loved animals. She loved reading. She loved horseback riding. She loved her children and adored her grandson. She was strong, loving, hardworking, and loyal. And Eddie was trouble. He had been abusive. He served time in prison twice, once for robbing a jewelry store and again for breaking into Mickey's house years before and stealing a CD changer, a speaker, and a TV. Mickey knew Eddie's brother long before she ever dated Eddie. She didn't start seeing Eddie until months after he got out of prison. He told her he would take care of her, that she could quit her job. But the money he had was not coming from honest work. Dee once said, "If you look into his eyes, you can see the devil." And that was the man her mother trusted. For 25 years, Dee has carried the weight of that night. She was only 17 when she ran screaming down Bell Street. 17 when she found her mother. 17 when her entire world changed. She lived through the fear, the threats, the silence, the pain, and the years of police inaction. But she is still here, still fighting, still asking questions, still looking for answers, and she will never stop fighting for her mother or for Eddie, because someone out there knows what happened. Someone out there heard something, saw something, or was told something, and even the smallest detail could finally bring this family the truth they deserve. Thank you for watching A Closer Look. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help this story reach more people. And if you know of an unsolved case or a missing persons case you would like me to cover, email me at acloserlook148@gmail.com. If you have any information about what happened to Mickey or Eddie, please contact the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Their number is 855-BCI-02HO. You can remain anonymous. Even the smallest detail can make a difference. Because when we look closer, we see what others missed. Together, we look closer. Together, we push for truth. And together, we make sure these stories are never forgotten. Keep looking closer. Keep asking questions. The truth is always there. When we look closer together, we bring light to the stories that were left in the dark. This is A Closer Look, where we never stop searching, never stop asking, and never stop caring. Because every case matters. Look closer, stay aware, keep caring.